interview d'Alastair Reynolds, Geekopolis 2005, Actusf. Hello, thank you for this interview.
Hello, nice to be here.
Nice to meet you too. Maybe first, may you present the two Alastair Reynolds, the scientist one, and maybe the writer too, please.
The scientist version of me is more or less dead, I think. I haven't really done much science in 10 years. I was a scientist full-time until 2004. I was working for the European Space Agency. I was also writing then, but I felt that it was difficult to do two things at the same time. I was struggling to write a book a year, and also do science was becoming harder and harder for me. I was just getting tired, so I felt one of them had to go, and the decision in the end was to give up the science. So I'm not too sorry about, I kind of enjoy my life now, and I started off as an amateur astronomer, then I became a professional astronomer. Now I've gone back to being an amateur, so I still have my telescope in my back garden. I've kind of gone back to the simple pleasures of just looking at things through telescopes without trying to be a scientist about it, So I'm happy with that.
Okay. You find a balance, more pleasure, less work, it's okay for you.
But I still have contacts in the scientific community, which is quite nice, because I still get to sort of occasionally I'd play at being a scientist. I still get to go to science events, like the recent landing of on the comet Rosetta, the Rosetta landing in last year. I had a small role in the PR program for that, which was quite enjoyable because I know some of the team. So I get to have all the benefits of having been a scientist without having to do any hard work.
Yes.
So it's good.
You made 13 novels about more than 60 short stories.
Yes.
And in your first novel, Revelation Space, it's not a space opera with aliens, with a weird world. No, it's just a story with men and space. What shows such an intimistic story for a first novel, and not high technology with aliens?
Well, it does have. It's. I don't think anyone ever. You never plan your career. You don't sort of have a strategy where you think, well, I'm going to do this novel first and then the second one. That's not how it works. I mean, I just wrote a book because I was interested in writing that book, and then I tried to sell it. In the meantime, I wrote another novel. By the time I'd finished the other novel, there was a little bit of interest in the first one. So that's the one that came out. But there wasn't any big, ambitious thinking behind it. I just wrote the book that I wanted to write at the time, and I suppose it was influenced by the science fiction I was reading over that period, which was the 1980s into the 1990s. I started writing that book in 1986, so a really long gestation. And then I sort of abandoned it, and then I picked it up again in 1992. Then I wrote it between 1992 and 1994. I finished the draft. I was reading, I suppose, a lot of cyberpunk was coming out then. That was quite an important sort of strand in science fiction. Space opera was not that big, but towards the end of the 90s, I suppose, space opera began to take off again, because you had Peter Hamilton, Ian Banks writing big books, and the fact that they had readers, I think, made it possible for me to get my book out there, because there was a readership for big science fiction books. There wasn't any real strategy there.
It's not a plan. In your novel Pushing Heights, Janus in French, men are lost on an alien artifact.
Yes.
In this one too, men are in the center of the story. We are very interested in mankind, how humanity reacts when she faces problem. It's very centered, yes, on mankind. It's very important in all your books, I think.
I hope so, yeah. I wanted to write about first contact between humans and aliens in a way that it wasn't possible because the Revelation space books have a certain structure, a certain universe, and that means I can tell certain stories in those books, but I can't tell other stories. So I wanted to do something different. I wanted to, in Star Trek, when the Enterprise meets the Klingons or the Romulans or the Ferengi, they're at a sort of comparable level of technology. They have slightly different spaceships, but slightly different weapons, but it's not too far apart. And that's not very realistic, because if we're ever going to meet aliens, they'll probably be very different from us, very advanced. But I wanted to tell that type of story. So Pushing Ice was a way of getting to the point where you could have first contact between different cultures at a similar technological level. So the whole book is a sort of structure to make that happen. But I also wanted it to be about the human characters at the heart of the story. And it was round about the time where I just stopped working as a scientist. So I had a lot of ideas about the different personalities you get in a large organization. So you have, in any organization, you'll have some people that are quite willing to cooperate, willing to put themselves to one side, get a job done. You also have people who are more obstructive. They're not happy unless their view is accepted. And I think in any situation you will always get this mix of people. So I thought, what would happen if you had sort of 50 or 100 people on a spaceship in an organization, and suddenly they're catapulted into this situation where they're on an alien artifact and they're out of contact with Earth, and they have to make all these decisions for themselves. So I was sort of drawing on my experience at the European Space Agency to think, if I took all the people I know and sort of made composite characters out of them, how would they cope with first contact? So that's why the characters are sort of quite strongly foregrounded, I suppose, in that book.
Your novels are like scientific approach. You test what the question is, how the first contact will happen, and you try to answer in each novel.
I try and, in a way, the books are how I think my way through a problem. I don't really know how I stand on a particular issue, be it scientific or technological or cultural or social, until I've sort of explored it in a novel. So I need to write the books in a way to sort of get my head around these questions, because I don't really have a good understanding of things until I've really written a novel about them.
Yes. Yeah. I have read Blue Remembered Earth is the next novel to be published in France.
Yes.
I think it's this year in August.
Very soon.
Very soon.
Yeah.
What is it about?
Well, I had got to the point where I'd written 10 or 11 other novels, and people were beginning to talk about my science fiction as being pessimistic and dark and gothic. And I understood why, but I didn't want that to be everything. I didn't want to be defined by that. So I wanted to try and say, look, no, I can also do this other stuff. And I wanted to write science fiction that was more in the spirit of Arthur C. Clarke. So quite optimistic, no villains, no bad guys, quite utopian in some respects. And I also wanted to write about space exploration. I wanted to go back to the idea of going to exploring the solar system, going to the moon and to Mars in a realistic fashion, and then build on that and say, okay, once we've explored the solar system, how do we go beyond the solar system? Can we get to other stars? What happens when we start sending people to other solar systems? How do we communicate? So I thought there's a lot of ideas that can be explored in a more realistic fashion than I've done in the other books. So that was the genesis of it. And then it was also, I was listening to a lot of African music at the time, West African music, and I started thinking about what if the main characters in this book are from an African sort of family. So it ends up being it's a family saga, a generational saga across 3 books, where we start with characters who are members of this rich kind of an African family that has invested in technology and industry in the 21st century, and then by the 22nd century they got loads of money, they're very powerful, and they control some of the technology to get up into orbit. They have sort of rights to that, but they have kind of a dark secret at the heart of the family to do with what the woman who sort of initiated it all. She's been a recluse for 80 years, and it's like, what happened to her? Why did she decide to just live in a space station and not have any contact with the rest of the family? And then she dies, and that sort of sets the sort of story in motion then, because her grandchildren have to work out what was going on with her. And I thought I could relate to this because I'd also had members of my family died when I was writing this book, and I had to dig into their affairs, find out about their bank accounts, and you sort of find out things that you didn't know. You know, it's sort of not always good, but it's an interesting process. So I thought, well, that's a good way of starting the story running. So that's the sort of basic engine behind the story of Blue Remembered Earth. And then there's two other novels that take the same family, but 200 years later and then 300 years later.
And again, human people at in the heart of the novel.
I think more so with that book than any of the ones before it. I didn't want to make it about cyborgs or post-humans or clone. Well, there are some clones, but they're very. I wanted to start it with people who are very much to us. So they listen. You know, they like football. They listen to music. They go to concerts. They don't have much money. Even the grandchildren, although they're part of this wealthy dynasty, they've been frozen out of it because one of them wants to be an artist, and that's made her unpopular with the rest of the family. So she's gone to live in a commune on the moon. She doesn't have much money, but she's trying to become an artist. And then the other grandson, he wants to study elephants. He wants to be a biologist. And again, it's sort of the family aren't giving him much money, so he has to scrape around to get the money he needs to study the elephants. So I thought, it makes them more believable because they're not all powerful. They don't control a galactic empire.
Yeah.
They still have the same problems we do. That they have to write off to the government for more money for their studies and beg and borrow.
Yes.
So I try to keep that focus on real human people through the three books.
Yeah. Another point, you write a novel with Stephen Baxter.
Yes.
Medusa Chronicle. How is it to write a full hand novel? How did you work with Stephen Baxter?
Well, we had an idea about a year ago. We decided we'd had an idea that we could write a novel together. First of all, we had to talk to our publishers and make sure that everyone was happy with the idea of us writing a novel. So we didn't plan it until we had everyone agreeing that it was a good thing to do. And then we met in a hotel in London. And Steve lives up north. I live in Wales, so we're hundreds of miles apart from each other. So we can't meet very often. We met in a hotel in London, the World Science Fiction Convention last year. Over coffee, we just said, right, let's just plan this thing. So we had, right, you do that bit, I'll do this bit. And we divided the book into six separate little stories, if you like.
Okay.
Mini episodes. It's about one character, and it follows this character through their life.
Is it a fix-up, as we say?
Not really, no.
Not really.
It could be a fix-up, but we won't publish any of these parts separately. What we did, we wrote. I did 3 bits. He did 3 bits. Steve did parts 1, 3, and 4, and I did parts 2, 5, and 6. So then we joined them together like that, and then we spent the last 3 months smoothing it out, and moving bits around, so it's not too obvious who did what. So we have a book, and now we're on the 5th version where we read through, change bits, try and make it more organic. So we couldn't publish any part of it separately now. It's not. I would say it's not really a fixer. It's just a book that broke down naturally into little episodes. I'm reading The Three Musketeers, you know, and it's there's like little stories. You get 100 pages about D'Artagnan getting into a duel, and there's another 100 pages about Athos or something. So it's sort of like that, but not as good.
And is it a longer way to create a novel? Did you like this kind of work?
Well, it was relatively straightforward. First of all, I was really busy last year, so I couldn't write my bits. So Steve did his bits, did 3 episodes before Christmas. Then he had to work on something else. Then I was able to work on my bits, so I took maybe 2 months to write my bits. And it was relatively straightforward. I think we knew because we had a structure.
Yes. A plan, separate works.
We could. I could read his parts. Okay, yeah, he's put something in there that I can really work with, and vice versa. So it was, I would say, pretty positive. It wasn't. I don't want to downplay the work, but it was. First of all, it was never going to be a long novel. We didn't want to write a huge fat book. We wanted to write a fairly slim novel because it's. I should mention it's a sequel to a story by Arthur C. Clarke.
Okay.
So that's the important part of the book is that it's an authorized sequel, and because we felt Clarke was a writer who didn't write big fat books, he was fairly economical. So we wanted our book to be economical, quite short, and it ended up bigger than we wanted it to be, but it's still a lot smaller than one of my novels. So yeah, it's been okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we both feel that we would maybe consider doing another collaboration.
Okay.
But not until we have an idea. But it's been a relatively. I mean, the thing is, I've known Steve Baxter for 25 years, and we know each other well enough. He knows what I think. I know what he thinks. There was very little chance that we were going to have any arguments because we like each other and we know each other's working methods.
You have just to find a moment to take a coffee, both, and it's okay. We'll find another idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have read you have signed a contract with Gollancz, I think, for 10 novels in 10 years.
That's right.
We had the 12 Labor of Hercules, and yet we have the 10 novels of Alastair Reynolds.
Yeah.
And is it okay for you now? Is it
It's been, I mean, we're still doing the 10 novels, but it's taking a lot longer. I mean, it was supposed to be a book a year.
Yeah.
So I signed that contract.
It started when?
2010.
Okay.
It was about 2 years of talking about it before we even signed the contract. So it's a little. I mean, the first book of that contract is Blue Remembered Earth.
Okay.
So I've written 3 novels of that 10-book sequence. I'm now writing the 4th book. The collaboration doesn't count. That's something separate.
Okay.
Logically, I should be on about book 6 or 7 by now.
Yeah.
But there've just been delays, editors leaving, just life, kind of crap that life throws at you. And I've not managed to write a book a year for the first 3 books. But now we're back on, we hope, a more firm schedule.
One novel?
Yeah, we hope so. Yeah. I mean, it's been good in some ways because it's given me a lot of job security. But
the rhythm is very high speed.
Yeah, I had written 10 books before that in 10 years, so I felt, well, I can do it again. And I like writing. I mean, I like to produce. I'm really cross with myself if I haven't written a lot in a year, because you only have a short life. And I think we should be active as writers. And I like to write a novel, but I also like to write maybe a novella, maybe 4 or 5 short stories. The problem is that I tend to, I often agree to do things because they sound like good ideas. So I often kind of put myself forward for doing too many things in a year, and then it catches up with me. So I'm trying to be a little bit more disciplined now about not always agreeing to do things. But I would say so far it's not been, I don't regret it, but it certainly will take longer to complete.
I'm sure your fan is behind you, supporting.
No, some of them, not all of them. Some people. I mean, you read things on the internet and people say, "Oh, since Reynolds got this 10-book deal, he's so complacent. You know, he doesn't work hard anymore because he knows he's got." And it's just, you just want to strangle them because no, I mean, I've never worked harder. The last 3 books have probably been technically the hardest 3 novels for me to write, and have taken months and months of hard work to get done. So I just think, well, if you think I'm coasting, come and have a look at my daily life, because I'm writing solidly throughout the day and into the evening for a good part of the year just to get the work done. So I get I kind of expected it. I mean, my agent said, when we talked about the 10-book deal, he said, there'll be a lot of backlash. There'll be a lot of people saying, kind of sticking the knife in.
Oh, okay.
And so I said, we'll just deal with that when it happens. So on.
So we are at Geekopolis. Are you a geek yourself?
I don't know. I mean, I'm very selective about what interests me. And I look around and I see a lot of stuff that actually doesn't really interest me, but I'm really happy I mean, for me it's all about books, text.
Okay.
Everything else is secondary as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
I'm not interested in manga or anime. Don't watch much television. I'm not that interested in science fiction cinema, because I think a lot of it's just not that good.
Comics, maybe? No,
don't read comics. Don't play games.
Maybe are you a cosplayer?
No. I really like it. I like that people can enjoy it and do it. I think it's fantastic. It's not my world, but I'm really happy for people who do it. So I'm very narrow in my interests as a geek. I was looking at those guys who've brought all those Star Wars models. Have you seen those spaceships?
Yes.
I could talk to those guys all day long because I like models. I was like, wow, Imperial Superstar Destroyer, about that long. Wow, it's awesome. That I get, and I like looking at there were guys doing 3D printing demos yesterday. That's fascinating to me. So I knew about 3D printing, but I'd never seen it in operation. Kind of interesting. But a lot of it's just, it's not my thing, but it doesn't matter. I mean, for a start, I'm a lot older than a lot of the people here. There's a younger demographic are into steampunk, cosplay, gaming. Why shouldn't they be? I'm very happy for them.
So if you like books, you might be a reader. So what kind of books do you read?
I read a lot. I used to read, obviously I used to read a lot of science fiction, but as you get older, you feel that you need to read the other stuff. Go back and read the classics. Things you should have read, I should have read when I was younger. And then also, I do want to keep up with science fiction, but I also feel I don't want to be too influenced by it. I want to keep a little bit of distance from what everyone else is doing, because then hopefully I can do something that's a little bit fresh. That's what I try to do. So I like to read a lot of Victorian novels. Like I say, I'm reading Dumas.
Okay.
Trying to read Russian literature, the English Victorian novelists like Thomas Hardy, Dickens. I like all that stuff, and I like the language. I like the really quite stiff, ornate language of the Victorians. And then, okay, you know, and I also want to read contemporary novelists as well. But at the moment, I'm kind of fascinated by the 19th century. It doesn't make me a steampunk, but I like it. I like reading. But I'm a slow reader as well, so I don't read like 100 books a year. At the moment, I'm trying to. So I got to the point where I felt I hadn't been reading. I subscribe to Asimov's science fiction magazine. I've been a subscriber for like 20 years, and I got to the point where I just wasn't reading it anymore. It was coming each month, and I was just leaving it in its envelope. I thought, this is stupid. So at the start of this year, I decided I was going to read the whole year of Asimov's, and not only read it, but write a little review of each story on my blog, because it would force me to think seriously about science fiction again, and also expose me to younger writers, people I hadn't heard of before. So I'm doing that, and I'm on the April-May issue, so I'm already falling behind. But I'm hoping to keep doing that throughout the year. So that's good. I'm kind of. I don't want to be one of these people like who doesn't read the younger generation. You know, I want to keep up with what's fresh and happening in science fiction. So that's a good way. And if the writers whose names appeal to me, I can then keep an eye out for their novels. And I think hopefully if I keep reading the stuff that's coming in, the new end of science fiction, then I can kind of keep my own stuff fresh. I think too many writers, they grow older and they only ever read their friends. They read the books by the same people of the same generation as them, which is fine because we all want to keep up with our friends. But I'd like to be able to kind of talk about what's happening in science fiction now, because that's where the interesting stuff is always written by the younger people entering the field for the first time, so they've got something to say, something to react against. And we're at a very interesting time in science fiction now, because we have a bit of a culture war going on, where there's a bit of a backlash against. Well, I would say science fiction has been opening up to minority voices, more women, more people from ethnic minorities, more foreign writers getting a voice, lesbian, gay, transsexuals, whatever. They're all getting more of a say in science fiction, and I think this is good. But there's also a little bit of a conservative reaction to that. They say, no, we want it to be more like the old days, where men were men in space armor.
The old way and the new way.
Yeah. So I think it's good that science fiction is becoming more diverse, and it should be encouraged. And I'm very interested to see how this culture war plays out. I mean, the focus this year is the Hugo Awards. It's become very, very polarized because of some science fiction writers have kind of mounted a campaign to control the Hugos, and they've succeeded. They're from a somewhat reactionary, conservative viewpoint. And I think it'd be very. We're in for some very interesting times for science fiction over the next few years.
So I think it's time.
Yeah.
Alastair, do you want to say something to your French fans?
Well, I'd like to say, particularly, I'm very grateful to my French readers who've not only stuck with me through the books, read them in French translations, but have been quite. They've been getting in touch with me and saying, when is the next book coming out? And it's good because it makes me feel that there's an audience there. So I'm with Brajilon now, the next novel, and I'm really kind of crossing my fingers that there's an audience who've enjoyed the earlier books and are still interested to hear what I have to say. And I'm really appreciative. I am a bit of a Francophile. I like France. The first country I ever came to was France.
Okay.
When I was, in fact, the first place I ever visited outside of the UK was Paris in 1979 on a school trip.
Oh.
Paris just blew my mind. I mean, I just could not. I'd never been to a big city before, let alone Paris, and I just could not get my head around Paris. It just went, how is it possible that it just goes on for a mile, you know. So I was blown away by Paris. And then a year later, I had another school trip and we went to Normandy, but we also visited Paris. So France has always been, I've got a special place, special affection for France because of that. My wife is French.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm very grateful for my French readers.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy Geekopolis, and maybe next time.
Yeah, no, I'm always happy to come over. Yeah.
Goodbye.
It's been a pleasure. Oh, thank you for the good questions as well.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
It was nice, cool. Thank you much.
Do you know these people?
No.
Lovely people.
Just joined to hear the interview. It was good. Questions.
Ah mince, ça.
You met Thibaut.